Higher places. It is possible to envision what a better political, economic, and social arrangement might look like. A good place to start is recognizing that groups are made up of individuals. Individuals share many, but not all, the structures of experience. There is a quality to each experience that is new. The unique quality of particular sequences occasionally lead to experiences that are valued collectively. The ineffable quality of bespoke subjectivity has worth beyond the personal experience in the elements of insight that can be shared. Distinct communities have value. Being composed of individuals, they are different answers to the problem of existence. Ideally, socio-political arrangements would be structured to preserve the insights of distinct communities across time. Resilient communities require self-sufficiency. The necessities of life need to be produced locally, and the distribution of jobs would reflect that imperative. Craftsmanship would not succumb to mass production. Community members would understand innately that relying on trade for the fundamentals of life is a direct threat to culture. Small communities would be incorporated into larger arrangements for the sake of resource sharing and energy-intensive production, but the arrangements that govern the larger group would not touch the laws that applied to the smaller communities. Political consolidation would not be possible. We can imagine a path back from the globalized world to a world of local communities. Countries could become independently viable by requiring domestic production. Large multinationals could be made to onshore manufacturing in order to have access to a given market. This could be staggered through industries over time to limit disruption. Smaller countries could be grouped together to become viable consumer blocks and ensure domestic production. But alas, such a revision of economic priorities is impossible in our world. Our system is a reflection of ourselves. We cannot place all the blame at the feet of the rapacious mogul for outsourcing a keystone business. What the CEO did was supported by the ambitions of the board, the greed of the shareholders, and the short-sightedness of the managers, and the apathy of the employees. Consolidation and economic rationalization are externalizations of the human condition. The hypothetical community-centered system could only exist in a world where the impulse to consolidate, to oppose, and to prepare to fight were foreign to the average experience. Such impulses would need to be rare pathologies recognized as illogical. The better place would not be created by intent. It would be a reflection of the nature of the inhabitants. Recognizing that our world is the system that suits our nature is beginning to seek a perspective that applies beyond this world. Such a perspective contrasts with both the monist and creationist perspectives. In the former case, non-attachment is desirable because life is characterized by suffering, and identifying with the body perpetuates the cycle. The diagnosis is accurate. This level of existence is hellish once the novelty wears off. And yet, there is a problem with the prescribed solution of realizing the essential nature of attention that persists beyond the self. Suppose that there were two seekers who both realize that they were not the self that is contingent on the meat suit. Both lose the distinction between attention and the moment. Both experience unlimited love as facets of the same essential one. Each is now an instance that is not separate from the moment. But even though the two are experiencing the same quality of awareness, they are localized in a region of the greater moment. Even experienced as a ripple moving through the greater thing, each is still a sequence, distinct from the other. The monist perspective emphasizes the experience of non-duality as the experience of ultimate truth. Merging with the one, or realizing that there never was a thing separate from it, is the logical endpoint of the perspective, and all other experience must be considered illusory in comparison. To describe this perspective as a dogma is not to doubt the experience of non-duality. Rather, it is to leave space for additional levels of experience. Attachment to form obscures non-duality. Attachment to non-duality hides something also. It obscures the unique structure of individual sequences of attention. If one thinks about the individual as a complex, constantly shifting shape of experience, then any instance of that shape is composed of structures common to others. But the individual is never a frozen moment. The trajectory of change is unique. Non-dual experiences are a response to a world where suffering predominates. If there are worlds where the mix is different, and the level of suffering is much lower, then non-duality is not the only conclusion to existence. Creationist traditions can appear opposed to the monist perspective, but they share the feature of attempting to answer the problem of this world and man's place in it. By providing an account that places man at the center of an intentional creation and insisting on divine personhood, the Abrahamic faiths necessarily insist that no part of the creation contains elements of the highest. At most, the creatures can partake in divine emanations, but the essential nature of the highest remains eternally remote. Creationist perspectives also seek to answer the problem of suffering, and in so doing rest on explanations affirming the dogmatic position that no part of the individual is fractal to the highest. Something interesting occurs when one does not insist on either the conclusion that essential nature is common to all others or the perspective that divinity is eternally remote. Without these dogmas, the significance of individual change is emphasized, the change that occurs in a single conscious life and the change that accrues across multiple instances. It becomes possible to see that the individual sequence of experience is the fundamental building block for physical reality and beyond, and that there is experience at every level of sophistication above and below the individual perspective. The experience afforded at a given level overlaps with higher levels. Higher experiences ensure the eventual inevitability of ascent through form. In a reality where there is no need to insist on choice between the conclusions of creationism and monism, we can recognize a relationship between three components. The first is the unchanging nature that underpins existence, which is often termed the highest or the one. The second is the specific forms and different levels of sophistication that reflect the shared structure of perception underpinning individual experience. And the third is the structures of experience that are particular to the individual as a new sequence of attention. The physical body is a structure composing a hierarchy of individuals at different levels of complexity. At the level of the protein, the cell, and the whole human, there is attention fractal to the highest, attention that is specific to form, and a measure of attention that is a new sequence. Though they adhere to the shared structure very closely and are not yet self-aware, the simplest forms are new sequences of experience. The hierarchy that exists in the body is the template for the hierarchy that exists beyond. Physical embodiment focuses attention on structures that are relevant to individual sophistication while corresponding to the whole. If we do not insist on the goal of merging with the One, or the perspective that man is the center of creation, then the possibility of higher places become conceivable. Such places can be glimpsed by increasing the potency of all three elements of attention. Increasing all three elements means the capacity to experience the highest is greater, the form that the individual occupies is optimized for a world of greater potential, and the sequence of individual experience is more significantly diverged from the shared experience. The traditions of our world generally assume that fuller expressions of higher nature are convergent, and imagine that a more harmonious existence will be a more homogeneous one. This is not necessarily true. Homogeneity is a quality of lower perspectives. A better world would allow for a more diverse experiential potential. The obvious objection to a perspective that values higher worlds is that they are not in evidence. It is all well and good to imagine better places, but it is not reasonable to ground metaphysics on them. This would be true, except that the kinds of experiences that characterize higher places are available here. Individuals in form share structures of perception that define a limited potential for attention. The experience that comes via the body is conscious attention. The shared structure of conscious perception extends into a landscape of potential that is every bit as real as form. This is the realm of supraconscious attention. The term supraconscious is intentionally used in contrast to the more familiar concept of the subconscious. Whereas the subconscious is used to refer to formative experiences that underpin consciousness, supraconsciousness refers to the entire structure of individual attention, the thing that was formed through attention in this life, as well as all antecedents. The supraconscious is more than a history of cause and effect, as the attention that formed the structure has always been at the end of a unique sequence. It is the thing that has been referred to by others as the daemon, the higher self, and the astral body. It is the I beyond this current I, the structure of an entire history of attention. To be human is, generally speaking, to be focused on conscious attention to the exclusion of the supraconscious. The process of growing from a child into an adult entails the imposition of patterns of thoughts and attention and the development of an unconsidered self. And yet, consciousness is only part of the story. The possibilities defined by form extend into greater potentials, and the supraconscious mind is never inactive. Rational thought is not possible without the feedback from the realm of ideas beyond the rational. In the realm of potential, it is possible to encounter experiences that cannot be accounted for by the body. Information can be processed seemingly instantaneously, without the need of words. Multiple points of focus can be observed simultaneously. One can gain knowledge that is not being encountered consciously. We have access to higher experiences and inspiration. For this reason, it is not mere fantasy to speak of higher places. The most familiar experience in the landscape of potential is dreaming. Not all dreams are the same. The most common dream is the body bias dream. This is where the conscious mind remains the focus of attention but extends into the realm of potential. Dreams of this kind are strange juxtapositions of symbols and events. Those inclined to dismiss the significance of dreams will often characterize all dreams as variations on this type. A less common type of dream is the dream where the supra-conscious predominates. This type is characterized by the experience of an authoritative voice, distinct from the inner monologue and yet familiar. The symbols encountered in this type of dream are intentional and impactful. Recently, I had a dream of this type where I saw two hooded figures seated facing each other in front of a marble fireplace. The room in which they sat was brightly lit, and there was a square lantern on a small table between them. The lantern was initially unlit. The light in the room went out, and the lantern came on, and my perspective was propelled back through a series of frames. Intuitively, I understood that this was a representation of an effect that was propagating across levels of reality. I found myself standing on a hilltop next to an archetypal wizard character. We were staring at a giant cream-colored sun in the sky, and he proclaimed that a new god was born. A different way to experience the landscape of potential is via a psychedelic experience that breaks tension free from the conscious bias. As with dreams, there are psychedelic experiences that tend towards a bodily bias, and those that are something else entirely. The former can be described as being awake but seeing into the landscape of potential. This type of experience allows one to begin to grasp the unseen elements that underlie the conscious moment. The latter is something else entirely. Years ago, I lit a candle and sat on the balcony of the townhouse I lived in at the time. I lit a joint that was a combination of passion flower and DMT. I smoked it carefully, using a kissing motion to take rapid small puffs and inhale as much as I could tolerate without coughing. About halfway through, I was no longer on my balcony. I was in a cave deep within the earth. There were 3 hooded figures with me. Though they were completely covered, I somehow knew that they were female. They were processing a black cloth that was feeding in through the walls of the cave by rolling it into bolts and collecting the bolts for storage. At this stage, I had not had a breakthrough psychedelic experience, so my expectation for the effect was that I would see geometric patterns and bright colors. One of the hooded figures looked at me and said, "Well, he is clearly here to see something." She indicated the bolts of rolled cloth. As my attention focused on the black fabric, it became clear that they were woven out of a seemingly endless complex pattern of colors. It was only as I was pulled into the Mandelbrot-like structure that I realized how strange the cave had been, but it was too late. Upon retelling this experience to someone who knows a great deal more about symbol and myth, I was told, matter-of-factly, that I had seen the Fates. I consider this to be an excellent explanation. One more type of dream bears mentioning. Some dreams are experiences of other lives. They are like bodily bias dreams, but the body is not the one currently occupied. This type of dream is like an experience of events that have already occurred, and one is along for the ride, feeling the character of the sequence, but not changing the trajectory. I've had a dream like this where I was in a different world. I was a different person, but I knew this person was also me. I was visiting my girlfriend on a university campus in this better place. The buildings were beautiful, with plants integrated into every room. My girlfriend was confident and assertive, and insisted that I was a gentleman as I escorted her about town. Things were clean, people were cheery, and the weight of concern was less. I came out of this experience with a strong desire to live in the world where this other me had lived. The beings one encounters in the supraconscious realm conform to the split between those arising from a bodily bias and those that are something else. In a conventional dream, the characters are usually props for the story. Sometimes, though, one encounters characters that they are not creating. A common characteristic of sleep paralysis, which is a state between the conscious and supraconscious, is the experience of creatures feeding on the individual's discomfort. On one occasion, I was sleeping in my car and experienced a dream loop where I would wake up in response to a noise or commotion, only to wake up again. It happened at least 4 times, and when it finally ended, and I woke up properly, I could see a distortion outside my car. It was as though a portion of my view of the landscape was bent around something, so that it shimmered. I got the unmistakable sense that this was a being of some kind, and that it had been influencing my dream as a kind of test or analysis. I watched the distortion move along the tree line and out of sight. I know the physical continues into the realm of potential. However, there is no type of evidence that could persuade a staunch physicalist that their perspective is limited. Much as the dogmatic religionists cannot suspend their presuppositions, the materialist finds comfort in a worldview that ends with the quantifiable. They often possess a strong body bias and believe that their conscious attention is all that there is. They do not acknowledge that their rational thoughts are interwoven with a fabric of awareness that stretches into unawareness. If one cares to notice, though, it is possible to experience synchronicities and precognition. Attention can be drawn to a series of meaningful events and signs. Some level of perception of events is possible to experience before the thing happens in the physical. The realm of potential is defined in relation to the physical. The shared structure defines a spectrum of potential, including events that are certain to occur, irrespective of the focus of individuals. The supraconscious is attentive to the landscape of potential, and some events are perceived before they happen. In this way, the conscious mind can be led to synchronicities or recognize things that are bound to occur. No number of synchronicities will satisfy the materialist. No precognition can overcome their skepticism. For those who deify the scientific method, there is nothing so unlikely that it cannot be dismissed as coincidence. There is no experience so profound that it cannot be pathologized and derided. Their worldview is comforting, and they will remain within it for so long as they need it. The impediments that lead to suffering in our world suggest something of the nature of better worlds. Given that the individual supraconscious possesses faculties suited to higher places, it is warranted to speak of such places as though they exist. The heavy bodily bias that is prevalent here is significantly reduced there. While beings in higher worlds are also in physical forms, their bodies are less of an impediment to the greater part of themselves. In higher worlds, all 3 elements of the individual structure are more developed. The part that is fractal to the highest, the part that is derived from the current form, and the part that is unique are all greater. As a result, the ability to see into the landscape beyond the physical is a familiar faculty. This ability to see into potential allows for greater symbolic representations. Without the body bias, the supraconscious can utilize symbols beyond those specific to the current form. Denizens of higher worlds utilize symbols and archetypes with broader applicability to the structure of reality. This allows them to better understand the effect they have on the shared structures of perception in their world and beyond. They can model the ripple effect of their individual and collective attention. In higher places, it is understood that the individual is a self-directed sequence producing a qualitatively unique perspective. The ability to access supraconscious awareness and see into the realm of potential allows the inhabitants of higher places to experience some level of the unique perspective of others. In this way, the novelty of perspective can be continually renewed. In our world, art is our closest approximation to sharing unique perspectives. Art exists in the space between the ideal and the individual expression, and unique individual formulation points at the underlying ideal. Thinking about our experience in comparison to better places allows for a new perspective. Apologetic approaches that seek to rationalize the problems of this world in the context of reality models that suit this place are insufficient if higher worlds exist. The existence of such places should not be dismissed as unreasonable fantasy. The individual has access to a greater range of abilities than the physical faculties. These abilities demonstrate a trajectory across lives. Even though this world is defined by suffering, the trajectory of individual development points to higher places.